You don't struggle to learn because you're not smart enough. You struggle because you've been learning the wrong way your entire life. And deep down, you already know it. There's a quiet frustration that follows you every time you sit down to study something new. You open the book, watch the video, read the notes, and for a moment it feels like progress. It feels like you're doing something right. But then, hours later, days later, when it actually matters, when you try to recall it, explain it, or use it, you come up empty. Not completely empty, but scattered. Broken pieces. Fragments that don't connect. And that's the part no one wants to admit. You've been trained to believe that learning is about exposure. That if you just see something enough times, it will somehow sink in. That repetition equals understanding. So you keep going back, rereading, rewatching, repeating the same cycle, hoping this time it sticks. But it doesn't, not really. Because recognition is not the same as comprehension. Seeing something again and thinking this looks familiar is not proof that you understand it. It's proof that your brain has seen it before. That's it. And yet, you keep rewarding yourself for that false sense of progress. There's a reason this keeps happening. And it's not random. It's comfortable. This way of learning protects your ego. It allows you to stay in a space where you feel like you're improving without ever being challenged. You don't have to confront the gaps. You don't have to face the truth that what you know might actually be shallow. So you stay there, in that loop, convincing yourself that more time will fix it, that more effort will fix it, that eventually it will all come together. But here's the reality that hits hard: it won't. Not like this. Not with the habits you've built. Because the problem isn't how much you're studying. The problem is how you're thinking while you study. Your mind is passive. It's consuming, not creating. It's observing, not questioning. And passive minds don't learn deeply. They collect information like clutter, piling it up without structure, without clarity, without purpose. Think about it honestly. How many times have you finished a chapter and felt good, only to realize later you couldn't explain a single concept from it clearly? How many times have you nodded along to something, convinced you understood it, but froze when asked to break it down in simple terms? That's not a rare experience, that's the norm. And it should bother you more than it does, because every time that happens, you're not just failing to learn, you're reinforcing a bad habit. You're teaching your brain that this is acceptable, that surface-level familiarity is enough, that confusion can be ignored. And over time, that becomes your default way of thinking. You stop digging deeper. You stop questioning. You settle, and settling is dangerous. Not because it feels bad, but because it feels fine. It feels normal. You don't notice the damage right away, but it shows up later. When you can't solve problems, when you can't think independently, when you rely on others to explain things over and over again, when you feel stuck even after putting in the hours. There's also another truth you avoid facing. It's not just about the method, it's about honesty. Real learning demands brutal honesty with yourself. It forces you to admit, I don't get this. And that's uncomfortable. It challenges your identity, especially if you see yourself as someone who's supposed to be smart, capable, or ahead. Admitting confusion feels like failure. So instead of facing it, you hide from it. You move on too quickly. You tell yourself you'll come back later. But later rarely comes, and even when it does, the cycle repeats. Because nothing has changed. The same approach leads to the same outcome. More time spent, more effort used, but no real breakthrough. Just more information layered on top of a weak foundation. The truth is, your brain isn't broken. It's not slow. It's not incapable. It's just responding to how you're using it. If you feed it shallow engagement, it gives you shallow results. If you avoid struggle, it avoids growth. If you chase comfort, it stays comfortable and weak. And that's the part that should hit the hardest. Not that you can't learn faster, but that you've been unintentionally training yourself to learn poorly. Every time you choose ease over effort, every time you move on without clarity, every time you confuse recognition with understanding, you're reinforcing the very thing that's holding you back. But here's the shift, the one that changes everything if you actually accept it. Learning is not about consuming more. It's about confronting what you don't understand and refusing to move forward until you do. It's about turning confusion into clarity, one concept at a time. It's slower in the moment, but infinitely faster in the long run. Because when you truly understand something, you don't forget it easily. It becomes part of how you think. It connects with other ideas. It strengthens your ability to learn even more. But that level of understanding doesn't come from passive exposure. It comes from effort, from struggle, from being willing to sit in that uncomfortable space where things don't make sense yet, and that's the space you've been avoiding. Not because you can't handle it, but because you've never been taught to value it. You've been taught to chase completion, not comprehension, to finish chapters, not master ideas, to move forward, even when your foundation is shaky. So you end up building knowledge like a house on sand. It looks fine from a distance, but the moment pressure hits, it cracks, it collapses, and you're forced to start over, wondering why it didn't hold. The answer is simple, even if it's hard to accept. It didn't hold because it was never solid to begin with. And deep down you knew that. You felt it every time you skipped over something you didn't fully get. Every time you told yourself, this is probably enough. Every time you avoided digging deeper because it felt too slow, too frustrating, too uncomfortable. That's the cost of learning the wrong way. Not just wasted time, but lost potential. Because you're capable of more, much more. But capability means nothing without the right approach, and right now the approach is what's failing you. So before anything else changes, this has to be clear. The problem isn't your intelligence. It's not your memory. It's not your ability to focus. It's the system you've been following without questioning, the habits you've repeated without thinking, the shortcuts you've taken without realizing the long-term cost. And until you face that honestly, nothing else will improve. Not the speed, not the depth, not the results, because real learning starts the moment you stop pretending you understand and start demanding that you actually do. You sit there with the material in front of you, convinced that effort alone should be enough. The pages are open, the words are clear, and nothing seems particularly confusing at first glance. It feels manageable, familiar even. The sentences make sense as you read them, one after another, and there's a quiet confidence that builds with every paragraph. It feels like progress. It feels like something is happening. But that feeling is deceptive, and it's where the problem begins, because what's actually happening is far less impressive than it seems. The brain is incredibly good at recognizing patterns. It picks up on repeated words, familiar structures, and predictable ideas. When something looks similar to what has already been seen, it creates a sense of ease. That ease is mistaken for understanding, but recognition is not comprehension. It's a surface-level response, not a deep one. And yet, it tricks the mind into believing that the job is done. That's why going over the same lines again feels productive. Each repetition increases familiarity, and familiarity feels like mastery. The words become easier to follow, the sentences feel smoother, and the entire experience becomes more comfortable. But comfort is not the goal of learning. In fact, comfort is often the signal that nothing meaningful is happening. Real understanding is rarely comfortable. It requires friction. It requires effort. It requires moments where things don't make sense. But those moments are often avoided. Instead of stopping and confronting confusion, there's a tendency to push forward, to keep reading, to keep consuming. The assumption is that clarity will come later, that understanding will somehow emerge on its own if enough information is absorbed. But it doesn't work like that. Information doesn't organize itself. It doesn't automatically turn into knowledge. Without active engagement, it remains scattered and fragile. There's also a hidden habit that makes this worse. Highlighting, underlining, marking important lines as if that act alone gives them weight. It creates the illusion of interaction, but it's still passive. The mind is not being challenged. It's simply selecting pieces of text and labeling them as important without truly processing why they matter or how they connect. It feels like control, but it's not. It's just another layer of distraction. And then comes the real test. Not during the reading, not during the reviewing, but later. When the material is no longer in front of you, when there's no text to rely on, no visual cues to guide your memory, that's when the illusion breaks. The ideas that felt so clear suddenly become vague. The concepts that seemed obvious become difficult to explain. There's hesitation, confusion, and sometimes complete silence where there should be clarity. This isn't a failure of memory, it's a failure of understanding. The brain didn't store the information deeply because it was never forced to. It was allowed to stay at the surface, where everything feels easy but nothing lasts. And once the external support is removed, there's nothing solid to hold on to. What makes this even more frustrating is the amount of time that gets invested in this process. Hours spent reading, reviewing, going over the same material again and again, all with the belief that progress is being made. And in a way, it is, but it's inefficient and fragile. It's like filling a container with holes. No matter how much goes in, it never stays. There's a reason for this, and it's rooted in how the mind works. The brain prioritizes efficiency. It avoids effort whenever possible. If something can be processed quickly without deep thinking, it will take that path. Passive reading is the easiest path. It requires minimal energy. The eyes move, the words are recognized, and there's just enough engagement to create a sense of familiarity, but not enough to create lasting understanding. This is where most people get stuck. Not because they lack discipline, but because they misunderstand what learning actually requires. They equate time spent with progress made. They believe that if they sit long enough, repeat enough, and stay consistent, the results will follow. But consistency without the right method leads to consistent failure. There's also an emotional layer to this. It feels good to stay in control, to stay in a space where everything seems manageable. Deep learning disrupts that. It introduces uncertainty. It forces questions that don't have immediate answers. It creates moments where nothing makes sense, and that feeling is uncomfortable. So it gets avoided. Instead, the focus stays on what feels safe. Repetition, review, passive consumption. These actions create a rhythm that feels productive even when it's not. It's easier to keep going than to stop and admit that something isn't clear. It's easier to pretend that understanding will come later than to face the fact that it hasn't come at all. But this approach has consequences. It builds a weak foundation. Each new piece of information is added without being properly connected to what's already there. Over time, the structure becomes unstable. It looks complete, but it lacks depth, and when it's tested, it fails. The frustrating part is that the solution is not complicated. It doesn't require more time or more resources. It requires a shift in how the mind engages with information. Instead of asking whether something looks familiar, the focus needs to be on whether it can be explained clearly without any external help. That single shift exposes everything. It removes the illusion and replaces it with reality, because when there's a genuine attempt to explain an idea in simple terms, gaps become obvious. Weak points stand out. Confusion can't hide behind complex language or repeated exposure. It becomes clear what is understood and what is not, and that clarity, even when it's uncomfortable, is where real learning begins. Until that shift happens, the cycle continues. More reading, more repetition, more false confidence followed by disappointment. Not because learning is difficult, but because the process is flawed. The mind is capable of much more, but it needs to be challenged in the right way. It needs to be pushed beyond recognition into true understanding. And that only happens when passive habits are replaced with active thinking, when comfort is replaced with effort, when familiarity is no longer accepted as proof of knowledge. Because the longer those illusions are allowed to continue, the longer real progress is delayed. Here's the uncomfortable truth that most people try to avoid for as long as possible. What feels like knowledge is often nothing more than a carefully maintained illusion. It looks convincing on the surface. It sounds right in your head. It even gives you a sense of confidence when you think about it. But the moment you're forced to express it clearly, without relying on the exact words you originally saw, everything starts to fall apart. That's because real understanding is not about recognizing information. It's about reconstructing it from scratch, in your own words, with your own thinking. And that's exactly where most people fail. Not because they lack ability, but because they've never trained themselves to do it. They've trained themselves to consume, not to create, to repeat, not to explain. There's a huge difference between saying something and understanding it. Memorized words can be repeated effortlessly, but they carry no depth. They don't adapt. They don't bend under pressure. They don't connect with other ideas. They just sit there, rigid and fragile, waiting to be forgotten. And yet, this is what most people rely on when they say they know something. The illusion becomes even stronger when the material is fresh. Right after reading or watching something, everything feels clear. The logic seems obvious. The steps make sense. It creates a temporary confidence that feels real, but it's not stable. It's borrowed clarity, not owned understanding. It depends entirely on the presence of the original source. Remove that source and the clarity disappears with it. That's the moment most people try to avoid, the moment of exposure, the moment where they have to stand on their own understanding without any support. Because deep down, there's already a suspicion that it won't hold, that the explanation won't come out clean, that there will be gaps, pauses, confusion. And instead of facing that directly, it's easier to stay in the safe zone where everything still feels familiar. But that safety comes at a cost. Every time the illusion is protected, it gets stronger. The mind becomes more comfortable with shallow understanding. It starts to accept it as enough. And over time, the ability to think deeply weakens. Not because it's gone, but because it's not being used. There's also a subtle form of self-deception happening here. It's not intentional, but it's persistent. The mind fills in gaps without realizing it. It connects dots that aren't fully understood. It creates a smooth narrative out of incomplete pieces. And as long as there's no pressure to test that narrative, it feels complete. But it's not. The real test is simple, and that's what makes it so powerful. Take any concept, no matter how simple it seems, and try to explain it in the most basic way possible. Strip away the complex terms. Remove the technical language. Break it down until even someone with no background could understand it. That's where the truth reveals itself. Because if there's real understanding, the explanation will flow. It will be clear, direct, and adaptable. It won't rely on memorized phrases. It won't collapse under simplification. But if the understanding is weak, the explanation will struggle. Words will become uncertain. Sentences will break. There will be a need to go back to the original material, to check something, to fill in missing pieces. And that's the exact point where the illusion breaks. That struggle is not a sign of failure. It's a signal, a precise indicator of where the gaps are. But instead of using it as a guide, most people see it as something to avoid. They interpret it as proof that they're not good enough, that they're not ready, that they need more time before they can truly understand. So they go back to the same habits, more reading, more repetition, more passive consumption. But the problem isn't lack of exposure. It's lack of engagement. There's also a deeper psychological resistance at play. Admitting I don't understand this feels uncomfortable. It challenges identity, especially if there's pride attached to being knowledgeable or capable. It creates a conflict between how things are perceived and how they actually are. And resolving that conflict requires honesty, brutal, uncomfortable honesty. So instead of facing it, there's a tendency to soften the truth, to say, I kind of get it, or I just need to review it one more time. These phrases sound harmless, but they keep the illusion alive. They delay the moment of clarity. They protect the ego at the cost of real progress. And this pattern doesn't just slow learning, it distorts it. It creates a false sense of competence that collapses under pressure. It builds confidence on unstable ground. And when that ground gives way, it leads to frustration, self-doubt, and the belief that something is wrong with the ability to learn, but nothing is wrong with the ability. The issue is with the standard being used to measure understanding. If the standard is recognition, then everything looks fine. If the standard is repetition, then progress seems steady. But if the standard is clear explanation, everything changes. The gaps become visible. The weaknesses become undeniable. And for the first time, there's an accurate picture of what is actually known. That shift in standard is where real learning begins. Because once the illusion is gone, there's no more hiding, no more pretending, just the work that needs to be done. And that work is focused, it's targeted, it goes directly at the points of confusion. Instead of circling around them, it also changes the relationship with difficulty. Instead of seeing confusion as something negative, it becomes something valuable, a guide, a signal pointing exactly where attention is needed. It removes the guesswork. It turns frustration into direction. But none of this happens until the illusion is confronted directly. As long as there's comfort in familiarity, there will be resistance to real understanding. As long as recognition is mistaken for knowledge, there will be gaps that never get filled. And as long as those gaps are ignored, progress will always feel slower than it should. The truth is simple, even if it's hard to accept. If something cannot be explained clearly, it is not understood. Not partially, not almost, not enough. And accepting that truth is not a weakness, it's the starting point of real strength. Because once that standard is in place, everything changes. Learning becomes sharper, thinking becomes clearer, and for the first time, progress becomes real instead of imagined. The real secret to mastering anything lies in simplicity. It is shocking in its clarity, almost cruelly simple, and yet it is ignored by almost everyone. The moment an idea becomes complicated, wrapped in jargon, or hidden behind technical terms, it loses its power. Complexity is a comfort, not a tool. It allows confusion to hide. But underneath the surface, there's a truth that cannot be escaped. If an idea is truly understood, it can be explained in the simplest terms possible. This principle is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means that mastery is within reach. Terrifying because it exposes weakness immediately. The moment you attempt to reduce an idea to its core, without adornments, without excuses, the gaps in your understanding are laid bare. There is no place to hide. Every assumption, every shortcut, every moment of half-understanding is revealed in sharp relief. And most people avoid this moment. They fear it because it demands honesty. It demands confrontation with reality. Simplicity is not a reduction of intelligence. It is a test of it. To take a complex subject and break it down so that it can be explained clearly requires not only understanding but precision, clarity, and depth. You cannot fake this. You cannot rely on memorized phrases or repeated exposure. You must internalize the concept to the point where it can be expressed without crutches, without external prompts, without hiding behind fancy language. At first, this process feels uncomfortable. It forces struggle. It forces you to stumble, to pause, to confront the fact that what you thought you knew is incomplete or flawed. Every time you hit a wall, that wall is not a sign of failure, it is a beacon. It marks exactly where the work needs to be done. Those moments of confusion, frustration, and doubt are the raw materials of true understanding. They are the points where transformation happens. But most people flee from them. They retreat into comfort. They revert to passive learning. They pretend the wall isn't there. The power of reducing complexity to simplicity lies in the act of teaching. Teaching is not about instructing others. It is a tool for testing your own understanding. To explain something clearly to another mind forces the internal structure of knowledge to align. If the explanation falters, it signals a weak point. If the logic collapses, it signals a gap that cannot be ignored. This is the principle that separates superficial learners from those who truly master their subjects. It's also a principle that shatters illusions. Most learning methods reward repetition and recognition. Highlighting text, rereading chapters, watching videos multiple times. All of these create a sense of progress without testing the depth of understanding. They allow you to feel productive while your mind remains passive. But simplicity exposes this passivity. It forces active engagement. It forces reconstruction. It forces the mind to generate knowledge rather than passively consume it. And the results are immediate, brutal, and undeniable. The first time you try to explain a complex idea simply, you will fail. You will stumble. You will recognize gaps you didn't even know existed. That recognition is uncomfortable. It challenges pride. It confronts ego. But it is also invaluable. It is the fastest path to clarity because it shows exactly where attention is required. It leaves no room for guessing, no room for illusion, no room for excuses. The process is deceptively simple. Pick one concept, any concept. Take a blank page and write it down as if you are explaining it to someone who knows nothing about the subject. Use the simplest words you can. Avoid technical terms. Avoid vague phrases. Don't accept partial explanations. If you get stuck, that is the signal. That is the point where true learning begins. Go back, rework it, simplify it further. Repeat until the explanation flows smoothly and confidently. Simplicity also forces connection. Ideas do not exist in isolation. To explain one concept clearly, you must understand how it links to others. You must see the relationships. You must see the cause and effect. You must see the underlying patterns. And once these connections are internalized, your ability to apply knowledge skyrockets. Memorization cannot achieve this. Passive learning cannot achieve this. Only active, precise reconstruction can. Another harsh reality this method exposes is that most people overestimate their understanding. When faced with the challenge of simplification, the illusion crumbles quickly. The pride of thinking I understand this is often replaced by the shock of realizing I don't understand this at all. That shock is not failure, it is a necessary awakening. It is the moment where learning accelerates because the mind is forced to confront truth directly. This method also cultivates efficiency. Time spent attempting to superficially memorize or reread becomes wasted compared to the focused, active work of simplifying and explaining. 1 hour spent genuinely reconstructing understanding produces far more lasting results than 10 hours of passive repetition. The mind begins to retain knowledge, not because it has been repeatedly exposed, but because it has been actively processed, challenged, and clarified. The simplicity principle is universal. It applies to mathematics, science, art, philosophy, or any skill. Complexity is an obstacle, not a requirement. The more something is stripped to its essence, the clearer it becomes. And clarity, once achieved, is permanent. The mind no longer struggles with fragments or partial understanding. The knowledge becomes usable, adaptable, and resilient. But here is the hardest truth. Most people never take this step. They are comfortable with the illusion of understanding. They avoid the discomfort of true engagement. They cling to recognition over comprehension, ease over effort, appearance over reality. And that is why progress is slow, knowledge is fragile, and potential remains untapped. Simplicity demands courage. It demands discipline. It demands honesty, but it also guarantees results. It forces the mind to confront weakness, address confusion, and reconstruct knowledge in a way that is permanent and usable. Every stumble, every moment of frustration, every gap revealed in the process is a stepping stone toward mastery. And unlike memorization or repetition, this approach creates strength that cannot be shaken. Ultimately, the core secret is this: complexity is the enemy, not the solution. True mastery is not measured by how many terms you can repeat, how many videos you can watch, or how many pages you can highlight. It is measured by the ability to take an idea, reduce it to its simplest form, and explain it clearly and confidently. That ability separates superficial learners from those who transform understanding into power, action, and insight. Once that simplicity is achieved, there is no turning back. Understanding becomes fluid, deep, and intuitive. It reshapes the way the mind approaches every new challenge. Complexity no longer intimidates because the mind has been trained to see through it, break it down, and internalize it. This is not a trick or a shortcut. It is the brutal, honest method by which mastery is earned. Most people avoid real learning because it is uncomfortable, and comfort has become their default. Comfort is seductive. It whispers that everything is fine. It convinces the mind that familiarity is enough. It allows half-understanding to masquerade as mastery. But every time you choose comfort over clarity, you reinforce weakness. Every time you skip the struggle, you extend ignorance. The mind prefers ease, and if it is allowed to indulge, it will take the path of least resistance every time. And that is precisely why so few people ever reach true understanding. The harsh truth is that avoiding the difficult moments is not just slowing you down, it's actively preventing growth. It keeps knowledge shallow, fragile, and fleeting. You might be able to recite definitions, repeat formulas, or recognize concepts, but when it comes to using that knowledge, to applying it in a real, unpredictable situation, it falls apart. It fails. And the frustrating part is that you've been complicit in creating this failure by choosing the easy path repeatedly. Fear plays a huge role in this avoidance. There's a subtle terror in facing the gaps in your knowledge. Admitting confusion feels like weakness. A pause, a hesitation, a falter in understanding all feel like proof that you are not capable. And that fear drives you to cover it up, to move on, to distract yourself with what feels safe instead of confronting what is actually necessary. But the truth is that avoidance doesn't protect you. It delays the inevitable reckoning with reality. Every avoided struggle becomes a debt that compounds over time, and it eventually comes due. Comfort is a trap because it feels productive. Highlighting pages, taking notes, rereading lines, listening passively, these are actions that mimic learning, and the mind rewards them. They create the illusion of engagement. They make you feel like progress is being made. But deep down, there is an emptiness. The knowledge does not stick. The concepts do not connect. And that feeling of false progress is insidious because it delays the moment of awakening, the moment when real understanding begins. The real learning happens in discomfort. It happens when the mind is forced to confront confusion and work through it. It happens when explanations fail and have to be reconstructed. It happens when assumptions are challenged and gaps are revealed. These moments are uncomfortable precisely because they expose weakness, but that exposure is the only way to grow. Without it, the mind remains passive, the knowledge remains superficial, and the cycle continues indefinitely. Most people avoid this because they fear struggle more than they desire understanding. They would rather feel competent than actually be competent. That desire for comfort overrides curiosity, overrides ambition, overrides the drive for mastery. But here's the brutal truth. Mastery does not reward comfort. It does not tolerate avoidance. It demands confrontation, discipline, and honesty. It punishes those who settle for superficiality. And it rewards those who endure the discomfort and push through it. This avoidance manifests in predictable ways. Skipping the hard parts, glossing over confusing sections, relying on summaries, waiting for someone else to explain. It is everywhere. Each of these choices is justified internally. I'll come back later. I just need a quick overview. I'm too busy right now. But later rarely comes, and when it does, the same avoidance patterns continue. The gaps remain. The knowledge remains fragmented. And the mind becomes conditioned to accept partial understanding as sufficient, which is exactly the opposite of what is required for true mastery. One of the harshest realizations is that no amount of passive consumption will compensate for avoidance. Watching more videos, reading more pages, listening to more explanations, these actions cannot replace active engagement. They cannot replace the struggle of confronting what is not understood. They cannot force clarity where it does not exist. They create volume without substance, repetition without depth, familiarity without understanding. There's also a subtle, self-reinforcing loop at play. Avoidance feels safe. Safe feels comfortable. Comfortable feels like success. But because the knowledge is shallow, every new challenge feels more difficult. Every new concept exposes old gaps. Every problem that requires application highlights the weaknesses that avoidance created. And so, the more you avoid, the harder it becomes to achieve mastery. Avoidance compounds difficulty, while confrontation compounds understanding. The antidote is simple in principle but brutal in execution. You must stop avoiding the uncomfortable parts. You must stop hiding from confusion. You must face every point of weakness directly and relentlessly. That means slowing down. That means engaging actively. That means struggling until clarity is achieved. It means refusing to accept the illusion of knowledge and demanding the reality of understanding. And yes, it is exhausting. It is frustrating. It is uncomfortable. But that discomfort is not the enemy. It is the mechanism of transformation. Confrontation with your own gaps changes your relationship with learning entirely. Confusion becomes a signal, not a failure. Struggle becomes the path, not a detour. Discomfort becomes an indicator of progress, not a warning to stop. When avoidance is removed from the equation, the mind is forced to adapt. It begins to process information actively, to test ideas, to reconstruct knowledge. And that is the precise mechanism by which learning accelerates. The difference is stark. Those who embrace discomfort and face their weaknesses develop depth, clarity, and resilience. Those who avoid discomfort accumulate fragments, confusion, and fragility. It is not a matter of talent, intelligence, or luck. It is a matter of courage, discipline, and willingness to face reality. Avoidance may feel easy, but it is a long-term sentence to mediocrity. Confrontation is hard, but it is the shortcut to mastery. Every time an idea confuses you, every time a gap becomes visible, every time understanding falters, that is not a signal to retreat, it is a signal to attack. That is where real growth occurs. That is where the difference between superficial knowledge and true mastery is made. Avoiding it prolongs struggle. Facing it transforms your mind. The truth is brutal. If comfort is your standard, you will never master anything. You will accumulate fragments, chase false progress, and settle for the appearance of understanding. But if you embrace the discomfort, face confusion directly, and refuse to move forward until clarity is achieved, you become unstoppable. Every struggle becomes an investment, every failure a lesson, every moment of discomfort a step toward mastery. And that is where real power lies, in refusing to let comfort dictate your limits, and in forcing yourself to engage with the hard truth of your own gaps. Time isn't your problem. Effort isn't your problem. The real problem lies in honesty, or more accurately, the lack of it. You tell yourself stories every day about why you aren't progressing, why you can't understand something, why it takes longer than it should. You blame schedules, distractions, difficulty, or the complexity of the subject. You search for external reasons because admitting the truth hurts too much. And the truth is harsh. The obstacle isn't external, it's internal. You are avoiding reality. You are lying to yourself about what you actually understand, and that lie is what slows you down. It's easier to think that something is too hard than to face the fact that it hasn't been engaged with deeply enough. It's easier to believe that the clock is against you than to admit that your method has been wrong all along. Every excuse feels comfortable because it shifts responsibility away from you. But comfort is never the path to mastery. It is the path to stagnation. And every time the mind finds an excuse, it reinforces weakness. Every time honesty is avoided, the same gaps persist. Most people have spent years perfecting avoidance. It has become a skill. They have learned to navigate around confusion, skip over what they do not grasp, and convince themselves that partial understanding is sufficient. That habit, repeated thousands of times, creates an internal structure that resists true engagement. Recognition replaces understanding. Repetition replaces clarity. Familiarity replaces depth. And yet no one sees it because the illusion is convincing. It feels like competence. It feels like learning. It feels like progress. But it is not. There is a painful reality hidden within this cycle. Time is neutral. Time alone does not create mastery. Hours spent passively reading or rewatching videos do not rewire the brain. Effort without honesty is wasted. You can spend 1,000 hours studying a subject and remain fundamentally ignorant if those hours are spent avoiding the points of confusion, ignoring gaps, or skimming surface-level material. The mind is excellent at protecting comfort, and comfort masquerades as learning. The shocking truth is that progress is not about how long you work, but about how deeply you engage. 1 hour of genuine struggle, 1 hour spent facing confusion directly, confronting gaps and reconstructing knowledge, will yield more than 10 hours of passive consumption. The problem is that struggle is painful. It exposes weakness. It forces confrontation with truth, and most people avoid pain at all costs. So they continue to waste time, thinking that action equals growth, when in reality, Action without honesty is motion without direction. The mind craves certainty, and avoiding discomfort creates a false sense of it. Familiarity creates a veneer of knowledge. Recognition creates a sense of competence. But real understanding requires the courage to admit over and over again, I do not fully understand this yet. That admission is not weakness, it is precision, it is clarity. It is the first step toward transforming confusion into mastery. Avoiding it, however, traps the mind in endless cycles of pseudo-learning where nothing sticks and progress is an illusion. There's another harsh reality. The fear of being wrong or inadequate prevents engagement with difficult concepts. Ego intervenes, whispering that confusion is failure, that struggling is proof of incompetence, that needing help is a weakness. And so, rather than face the discomfort, the mind takes shortcuts. It avoids the parts that challenge it most. It clings to what is already familiar. It stays on the surface where illusion is comfortable. But every shortcut reinforces fragility. Every avoidance reinforces incomplete understanding. Every delay in confronting truth makes the eventual struggle harder. This avoidance is cumulative. Each unaddressed gap compounds over time. Each partially understood concept makes the next concept harder, because learning is not a series of isolated facts. It is a network of interconnected ideas. Avoiding honesty in one area creates weakness in another, and slowly, the mind builds an entire structure of superficial knowledge that collapses under pressure. The more gaps ignored, the more fragile the foundation becomes. Yet, the moment of honest confrontation, though uncomfortable, rebuilds strength faster than any passive method. True learning begins the moment honesty replaces avoidance. The moment the mind refuses to accept, I kind of get it, and demands, can I explain this clearly and simply? That question is ruthless because it exposes the gaps that excuses try to hide. It challenges comfort directly. It forces engagement with the hard parts, the confusing parts, the moments where struggle is unavoidable. And those moments are precisely where transformation happens. Effort alone is meaningless without this brutal honesty. You can put in hours, sweat, energy, and focus, but if you are skimming the surface, avoiding gaps, or rationalizing confusion, the results will be weak. The mind will remain passive. Knowledge will remain fragmented. Confidence will be fragile. But combine honest engagement with effort, and the same hours that previously yielded nothing now become explosive. Each hour compounds understanding. Each moment of struggle solidifies mastery. The real test of honesty is simple. Can the knowledge be expressed clearly, concisely, and confidently without relying on memorized phrasing or external aids? If it cannot, the work is incomplete. If it cannot, the struggle has not yet begun in the right way. If it cannot, comfort has triumphed over clarity. And that moment of realization, though uncomfortable, is where the mind finally has a chance to break through. Avoiding honesty is a trap because it feels safe, but it guarantees stagnation. Facing reality is brutal, but it guarantees growth. Effort combined with courage, the courage to face confusion, admit gaps, and confront weakness, is the multiplier that transforms average learning into rapid mastery. The mind will resist at first, but persistence through that resistance rewires thinking, strengthens comprehension, and accelerates every step of the learning process. The takeaway is unavoidable. Time and effort are meaningless without honesty. Excuses, avoidance, and comfort produce nothing but fragmented knowledge and slow progress. True acceleration requires the willingness to stare directly at what you do not understand and stay there until clarity emerges. That willingness is uncomfortable, painful, and ego-challenging, but it is also the only path to real understanding. The moment honesty becomes non-negotiable, learning transforms from a slow, uncertain process into a precise, powerful, and unstoppable force. Pick one concept, just one, not a chapter, not an entire subject, just a single idea that you want to truly understand. Take a blank sheet of paper or open a blank document and write it down. Don't copy definitions. Don't rely on textbook language. Strip it to the simplest terms possible. Imagine explaining it to someone who knows nothing at all about the topic. This is not an exercise in showing off vocabulary or technical skill. This is an exercise in clarity, in forcing your mind to engage actively with the core of the idea. Start by writing what you think you know. Put it all on the page. Every detail, every connection, every assumption. Then pause. Look at what you've written. Now ask yourself, does this explanation actually make sense? Could someone else read this and understand it without additional guidance? The moment you struggle to answer that question is the moment your true gaps are revealed. That struggle is not a sign of weakness. It is proof of where the real work begins. When confusion appears, don't ignore it. Don't skim past it. That is precisely the point you need to focus on. Go back to the source material. Reread it carefully. Break it down further. Ask questions. Why does this work this way? What causes this effect? How does this connect to other ideas? Do not accept surface-level answers. Demand clarity. Rewrite your explanation in simpler terms. Repeat this cycle until the concept can be expressed smoothly, confidently, and in plain language. The process forces active engagement. It turns passive consumption into active creation. Reading or watching alone allows information to float through your mind without anchoring. But reconstructing knowledge requires mental effort. It forces the brain to organize information, connect concepts, and make sense of relationships. The gaps that were invisible before become painfully obvious, and that visibility is the point. Without seeing where understanding fails, improvement is impossible. This method also builds resilience in learning. The first attempt at explaining a concept will almost always be imperfect. Words will stumble, sentences will break, connections will be missing. That is expected. That is necessary. Each failure is a signal, a roadmap showing exactly where attention is required. Instead of being discouraged by confusion, treat it as a guide. Each moment of struggle is a step forward. Each revision brings you closer to mastery. The power of this approach is that it is scalable. Once you can do this with a single concept, the process can be applied repeatedly across any subject. Complexity becomes manageable because it is broken into digestible pieces. Confusion no longer overwhelms because the method itself provides a structured path through it. The mind begins to think in clarity, not in fragments. Every new idea is integrated into understanding rather than just memorized superficially. Ultimately, this is how knowledge becomes owned rather than borrowed. The mind stops relying on external prompts. Recognition is replaced with comprehension. Confusion is replaced with clarity. Understanding becomes durable and flexible, ready to be applied, tested, and expanded. And once this process is internalized, it transforms the way learning happens. The same approach that builds mastery in one concept can accelerate understanding in hundreds more, turning effort into results in ways that passive learning never can. This is not easy. It is uncomfortable. It requires patience, discipline, and persistence. But the results are undeniable. By focusing on a single concept, reconstructing it from the ground up, and refusing to move on until clarity is achieved, the mind rewires itself for rapid, deep, and lasting learning. Every concept mastered this way strengthens the foundation for the next, and soon the compounding effect transforms the pace and depth of understanding entirely. Stop asking yourself if you recognize something and start asking whether you can explain it clearly. That single shift in mindset changes everything. Recognition is a comfort. It allows the mind to feel familiar with something without truly owning it. Seeing a formula, reading a definition, or nodding along in a lecture creates the illusion that understanding exists. But familiarity is not mastery. Knowing that something looks right is not the same as being able to reconstruct it, apply it, or teach it. The question that matters is no longer, does this look familiar, but can I articulate this in my own words? This change in perspective forces honesty. It refuses to tolerate partial understanding or shaky connections. If a concept cannot be explained clearly, that is the signal to dig deeper. It exposes every assumption, every weak point, every moment where knowledge has been glossed over. There is no hiding behind familiarity anymore. There is no comforting illusion that, I kind of get this. Every gap is revealed, every uncertainty is illuminated, and that is where real learning begins. When the standard becomes explanation instead of recognition, the learning process itself transforms. Passive consumption no longer suffices. Highlighting, rereading, and watching videos lose their value if they do not result in the ability to articulate the concept independently. Each moment of confusion becomes actionable. Each struggle is a signal, a precise indicator of where effort is needed. The mind is no longer wandering through material. It is actively processing, testing, and integrating knowledge. This approach also cultivates clarity in thought. Explaining something simply forces the brain to structure information logically, to identify relationships, and to strip away unnecessary complexity. Complexity no longer intimidates because the focus is on understanding, not memorization. The harder parts of a subject become navigable because the process provides a roadmap: isolate, simplify, reconstruct. Each explanation strengthens the neural pathways that support comprehension, creating durable knowledge rather than fragile familiarity. There is another powerful effect of this shift. It builds confidence rooted in reality. True mastery does not come from repeated exposure or superficial recognition. It comes from the ability to reconstruct understanding at will. When the mind has practiced explaining clearly, confusion becomes manageable. Struggle is no longer a threat, it is a tool. Uncertainty is no longer frightening, it is information. Every time the mind successfully articulates a concept, the foundation for future learning becomes stronger and more resilient. The shift is deceptively simple but brutally effective. It eliminates wasted effort. Hours spent memorizing, rereading, or reviewing without engagement become irrelevant. Instead, time is invested where it matters most, actively confronting gaps, testing understanding, and building clarity. The compounding effect of this mindset accelerates learning dramatically because every concept mastered through explanation strengthens the ability to master the next. Ultimately, asking, "Can I explain this clearly?" transforms the way the mind interacts with knowledge. It turns passive reading into active thinking, confusion into opportunity, and struggle into growth. Recognition is replaced with comprehension, familiarity is replaced with mastery, and the habits of superficial learning are replaced with habits that produce lasting results. This single question, repeated consistently, becomes a lens through which all learning is filtered, ensuring that every effort produces real, tangible understanding rather than an illusion of progress. Once this mindset is adopted, the way challenges are approached changes completely. Difficult concepts no longer paralyze, they guide. Moments of confusion no longer frustrate, they instruct. The mind becomes disciplined, precise, and relentless in pursuit of clarity. Learning ceases to be a passive accumulation of facts and transforms into an active, self-correcting process that guarantees depth, retention, and mastery. Every breakthrough in understanding begins with a single uncomfortable step, admitting what you do not know. That admission is not weakness, it is the starting point of all real learning. The mind tends to resist this truth. It prefers to cling to familiarity, to pretend that partial knowledge is sufficient. But mastery cannot coexist with pretense. Until confusion is confronted directly, knowledge remains fragmented, fragile, and temporary. The key is to treat confusion as a guide rather than a barrier. Each moment of uncertainty, hesitation, or gap is a signal pointing exactly where attention is needed. Ignoring it may feel safer, easier, or faster, but that safety is deceptive. It produces only the illusion of progress. Facing it, however, produces real momentum. The struggle of confronting what you don't understand is not wasted. It is the engine that drives deep comprehension. Active engagement is the only antidote to superficial learning. Passive exposure, reading, watching, highlighting, or listening, is not enough. The mind must wrestle with ideas, reconstruct them, and test them. Asking questions, simplifying explanations, and forcing connections transforms scattered information into structured knowledge. Every failure along the way is a roadmap, revealing exactly what needs work. The discomfort signals progress, not failure, and the persistence to push through it is what separates superficial learners from true masters. This method also trains the mind to think independently. Knowledge is no longer borrowed from textbooks or lectures, it becomes owned. Every concept understood deeply strengthens the foundation for the next. The ability to explain, connect, and apply information builds mental resilience. The mind becomes self-reliant, capable of navigating complexity without relying on external cues. Ultimately, mastery is not about effort alone, nor about time spent. It is about precision, honesty, and the courage to face gaps head-on. Every moment of discomfort is an opportunity. Every struggle is a step toward clarity. Learning accelerates not when the easy path is taken, but when difficulty is embraced, examined, and conquered. The mind grows fastest where it is challenged most, and when that approach becomes habitual, understanding becomes permanent, flexible, and powerful. It's time to stop making excuses. Every delay, every half-hearted attempt, every moment spent on passive learning has brought you here, to the point where results feel slow, knowledge feels fragmented, and progress seems invisible. The truth is simple. The only thing holding you back is your unwillingness to confront reality. You have all the tools you need. You have the brain capable of learning faster, deeper, and more efficiently than you allow yourself to believe. What you lack is discipline, honesty, and the courage to apply the method that transforms potential into mastery. Real learning is not convenient. It is not comfortable. It does not reward avoidance or shortcuts. Every moment of struggle, every pause, every gap in understanding is not a problem to evade. It is the exact opportunity your mind needs to grow. Clarity does not come from recognition, repetition, or familiarity. It comes from reconstruction, from active engagement, from refusing to move on until every idea can be explained clearly, simply, and confidently. That is the benchmark of true understanding. You have been trained to value comfort over depth. You have been trained to chase superficial progress, to measure learning by hours spent or pages read instead of by comprehension achieved. That training is deceptive. It gives a sense of accomplishment without delivering results. It creates a false confidence that collapses under pressure. The moment you stop hiding behind illusions is the moment you take control. You stop letting time, distractions, or complexity dictate your limits. You begin to set your own standards. Start now. Pick a concept, any concept, and reconstruct it from the ground up. Strip it to its simplest form. Explain it as if no one knows anything about it. When you stumble, and you will, face it. Do not retreat. Go back, review, question, simplify, and rewrite. Each failure is feedback. Each struggle is a step forward. This is how the mind rewires itself for fast, deep, and lasting learning. Every concept conquered in this way strengthens the foundation for the next, creating a compounding effect that accelerates understanding far beyond traditional methods. Do not underestimate the power of simplicity. Complexity is the trap that allows the mind to hide from its weaknesses. Breaking an idea into its essential parts forces clarity, exposes gaps, and builds durable knowledge. Repetition alone does not create mastery. Recognition alone does not create mastery. Only reconstruction, active engagement, and brutal honesty produce results that last. The discomfort you feel is proof that growth is happening. Embrace it, pursue it, do not shy away from it. Time, effort, and intelligence are meaningless without honesty. You must confront what you do not know. You must refuse to accept partial understanding. Every gap revealed is a guide. Every struggle faced is progress. Avoidance produces illusion. Engagement produces mastery. It is that simple, and it is that harsh. Now imagine yourself 1 month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, having applied this principle consistently. Imagine the acceleration of understanding, the clarity of thought, the ability to tackle complexity without fear. Imagine a mind trained not to settle for surface-level knowledge, but to demand clarity, to reconstruct ideas, to own understanding fully. That is the power of this method. That is what is possible when excuses are abandoned and honesty is embraced. This is your challenge. Stop consuming, start reconstructing. Stop avoiding discomfort, start confronting it. Stop pretending you understand, start proving it. Every concept, every skill, every piece of knowledge you wish to master is waiting. The path is clear, the method is precise, and the results are inevitable. But only if you act. Do not wait for perfect conditions. Do not wait for motivation to strike. Do not wait for someone else to guide you. The opportunity exists in the moment. The method exists in your willingness to engage. The transformation exists in your refusal to accept anything less than clarity. Your mind is capable of brilliance, but brilliance is earned, not given. Every hour you spend half-heartedly is an hour lost. Every concept left partially understood is a gap that will haunt you later. Every excuse is a chain you place around your own potential. Break those chains now. Commit to reconstruction, to active engagement, to simplicity, to honesty. Confront the struggle, embrace the discomfort, and refuse to move forward until understanding is complete. The time to act is now. No more excuses, no more illusions, no more wasted effort. The power to learn faster, deeper, and more effectively is in your hands. The choice is yours. Continue down the path of superficial progress and frustration, or take control, face reality, and transform your mind into a tool of unstoppable understanding. This is not optional. This is not theoretical. This is the moment to decide whether you will settle for mediocrity or pursue mastery relentlessly. The challenge is clear, the method is proven, and the results are yours for the taking. But only if you act decisively, consistently, and without compromise. Your potential is waiting. Your clarity is waiting. Your mastery is waiting. Stop waiting. Start acting.